Welcome to Listening with Ben Crispin, WUSC's best and only interview radio show, all live on 90.5. We talk to musicians you want to hear from, the ones left of the dial and right in your ear. I'm here today with Ross Farbe and Ray Micarelli, better known by their band name, Video Age. They just released their third album, Pleasure Line, late last year. Ross and Ray, would you like to introduce yourselves to our listeners before we get into the questions?
Hello, everybody. My name's Ross.
And I'm Ray.
Very happy to be here talking to y'all today.
I'm super happy to have you guys here because, like I said before we started recording, I absolutely adore your guys' music, and I would love to talk about your music and your albums and your band and just everything about you guys.
Oh, well, thanks for having us. Yeah.
First, I usually like to start off these interviews by talking about your backgrounds and pasts as musicians, because I think it's really cool to see how past projects have evidence and affected present sounds and how they've gotten you to Video Age now. So could you guys talk about any bands or any musical influences that you've had before Video Age and how it's gotten you here now?
Yeah, so we're both drummers. Ray and I both grew up playing drums. We met in New Orleans in 2008, and we were going to the same school here, Loyola, New Orleans, and we were playing with a ton of people. There's a really awesome little community we had, playing all kinds of music. We were both really into, your 60s songwriters, like the Ray Davies with the Kinks and, John and Paul, and, doing our sort of rock and roll songwriting sort of music at that time, but like also all over the map. Ray you can say this yourself, but came to New Orleans partially because he loves New Orleans music and like the Meters and Alan Toussaint and stuff like that. So we connected on all that stuff too.
Yeah, and I remember Ross said the first thing I ever heard him say was he was talking to my other friend and they were introducing themselves, and he said, "My favorite band is the Beatles." I remember that. And I was like, man, that is daring.
That's super funny. I really like that. So you guys just met up, and with your collective interest in music, you just decided to start a band, or what was the thought there?
Well, we were both playing in a lot of different bands, and some with each other, and kind of like realized that we both like writing songs together. Ray wrote some songs for me to sing, and then we were like, wow, this is fun. Let's do a band where it's us writing songs together.
It seems like it panned out in the end.
Yeah.
I think it's really, really fantastic when, especially artists together, a band, not just a solo artist, but more than one person come together with a passion for music and they make something that's so tangibly good and recognized. I think it's a really special thing. So I'm kind of envious of you guys. It's cool. It's super cool.
Yeah, we're grateful. It's a miracle, when a group of people is all down to put their time and energy into a project together. It's really something special.
So I'd like to talk about, you hit on New Orleans, which I'm going to talk about in a further question. But right now, I'd love to talk about Video Age's sound, because it's so wholly unique and distinct to you guys. I haven't really heard many other songs like the ones that you do, like Pop Therapy and Shadow on the Wall are so different, but they're so lively and musical that I have trouble describing your band's sound to other people.
Us too, yeah.
Well, this question might be a little tricky for you guys. I was going to ask, can you put into your own terms what your sound is? Maybe less so a genre if you don't know, and more maybe a feeling and what you're trying to convey.
Something that we definitely started out with was when we were playing garage rock and loving like the 60s musicians, we followed their career into the 70s and 80s. And then we thought it was so funny when they were using these different instruments like synths and drum machines, and they were exploring and trying to push boundaries still. Mm-hmm. Man, this stuff is really good. We hadn't listened to it when we were younger. And we kind of discovered it in our mid-20s. So sometimes I wanted to describe our sound as emulating our heroes from the 60s as if they were in the 70s and 80s, embodied in
and also almost like as if they were still doing it now sometimes. Yeah. I mean, Paul McCartney's still doing it now.
Yeah.
He just put out McCartney 3.
Yeah, I was excited about that.
It's a wild ride of an album.
I think again, your sound is so unique to you guys because it does evolve, like what you're saying. It seems to me that your influences are very generational, from 60s to 70s to 70s to 80s. That's reflected in your albums. You know, your first 2016 album is a bit more rock, and then you get to Pop Therapy, and it's a lot of synths and stuff. It reminds me of like music that astronauts would play on VHSs in like a space station. And then you get to Pleasure Line, which is so good. I kind of describe it like when my friends ask about it, they're like, "Hey, give me a music recommendation." I'm like, "Here, check out this band, Video Age. Its album is Pleasure Line." It kind of sounds like if you cut the audio out of the Full House intro, you could play any one of these songs over top of it and it would work perfectly. Like it's a very nostalgic, very, very cool 80s feeling. And I just love that. Can you talk a little bit more about the influences that you draw from, like those 60s garage rock bands and maybe the ones that you've kind of evolved into?
Yeah. So I mentioned like Ray Davies a second ago, and like the New Orleans music, the Alan Toussaint productions and Lee Dorsey and that kind of stuff. We love like the classic kind of songwriting stuff like that, in that vein. And yeah, I think we've been always interested in taking the songs we're writing or like the musical ideas we have, and then like trying to flip them on their head and perform them with different instruments and like different arrangements to kind of like reimagine them, I guess, is like something we're always doing. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think we're also always inspired by people who do that, like the J-pop stuff, the 80s Japanese pop music, like Harumi Hosono is a great example where he can do any genre and like it still sounds like him, you know, because he's just so free with like the way that he will execute a song. And like, you know, sometimes it'll be, if you took away all the instrumentation and played it on an acoustic guitar, it'd be like a really straightforward thing, but he'll do it in like such a kind of unique way. We're always inspired by that kind of stuff, I think. Reimagining how you can make one of these tunes we're working on into something new.
I love that. So I'd like to ask, because I know that New Orleans is a really musical city. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of different genres and lots of different pockets of stuff, you know, drum and bass and bounce and lots of other things going on there. Can you talk a little bit about what it's like to play in New Orleans, to, you know, derive some of your influences there, maybe some of the collaborations that you get to work on because you're in the city? Can you comment on that?
Up until the pandemic, Ray was gigging a lot, just playing in all kinds of different musical projects and bands, where you can play any night of the week, you know, in a normal time in New Orleans. There's like a lot of places that will have music every night. So that attracts a lot of people who want to just like commit to doing music full time. So there's all kinds of people in New Orleans that are really talented musicians and came here just to like work on their craft. So we have a lot of friends who like, you know, are like expert pedal steel players, or like
Cajun accordion.
Yeah, Cajun accordion, like really cool, like kind of maybe stuff you wouldn't find in another city, that live here and play music all day long every day.
And the drums, of course.
Yeah.
Birthplace of jazz. And then when I found out that Ross like went to the best drum line, the high school with the best drum line in New Orleans, Brother Martin High School, and he studied under this kind of famed teacher named Marty Hurley, who that guy taught like some people that I love, like Stanton Moore and Ross. So I was like, man, this history is it touches you. Yeah, totally. You can't avoid it.
Yeah, I started playing music and drums specifically because pretty much of like Mardi Gras parades. I was really young when I started playing music, and I just remember going with my family. We'd set up for the parades, and the marching bands would come by and they'd be so loud, and the drummers would be like dancing while they're playing and having a blast. And I just loved it. and that's kind of what made me start playing music, was like Mardi Gras marching bands.
We're going to take a quick break, but you've been listening to Listen In with Ben Crispin, WUSC's best and only interview radio show, all live on 90.5. I'm here today with my guests Ross Farbe and Ray Micarelli, better known by their band name Video Age. They just released their third album, Pleasure Line, late last year. After the break, we'll hear a select few songs from Pleasure Line, and then we'll continue talking to Ross and Ray about their sounds, influence, and the future of Video Age as a band. Welcome back. You've been listening to Listen In with Ben Crispin, WUSC's best and only interview radio show. If you're just joining us, I'm here today with my guests Ross Farbe and Ray Micarelli, better known by their band name Video Age. Just after the break, you heard Pleasure Line, Comic Relief, and Sweet Marie, 3 songs off of Video Age's newest 2020 album, Pleasure Line. Now, Ross and Ray, it's hard to have one of these interviews without bringing up the pandemic.
It's obviously affected a lot, right? I can tell that it's definitely affected New Orleans. I know Mardi Gras has been massively affected by it. But I also know that, it's hit musicians pretty hard as well, from exploding tours and live gigs and live music to, I've heard of musicians completely changing their sound or having so much more time in quarantine to focus on things that they really start changing what they write about or, what they sound like. So can you comment a little bit on how the pandemic has affected you guys, maybe negatively or positively?
Yeah, it's been a trip. It's we were all scheduled and ready to put out Pleasure Line right when the pandemic hit. So that was kind of we never would have expected that, but we're just thankful that we were able to still put out music, and do what we do. As far as like how we're doing these days, we're just kind of hunkered down still, working on stuff as we can. I do a lot of studio work in New Orleans with other artists, so I've been doing a lot of sessions, producing and engineering, which is great because people got a lot of time, like you were saying, to write new material and work on that side of things when you can't play live.
Yeah, we were lucky enough to be able to put out the record like at the very beginning of lockdown. Like the first single came out in April. So we're kind of in that mode of like, we finished that record cycle and now we're kind of like, we would be touring. That's the biggest drag, is not being able to tour the record. But everybody's in the same boat. So everybody can take care of each other and we'll get this, sorted out.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. Everyone is definitely in the same boat. I've talked to a lot of people who have been really affected by this, and it's impressive almost the wide scale that it has. I'd like to talk a little bit about Pleasure Line specifically because it is such a good album. Actually, at the radio station, the way that we have to play music for our shows is a breakdown. It's 50% of the music that we would like to play, the DJs themselves, and then 50% rotation, which is music selected by the radio executives that we are supposed to play. We select from, we play 50% of that on our shows. And Pleasure Line was put into rotation. And I was really, really excited because usually I don't recognize some of the artists in rotation. And I was like, oh my God, Video Age. I love them. Pop Therapy. They're super fantastic. I'll play Pleasure Line. This is awesome. But it was funny because almost everyone else had that exact same idea. So for the 3 weeks that you tune into WUSC, it was just exclusively Pleasure Line playing over and over and over and over again.
I got to go to Columbia.
That's so cool.
It's a great album. Everyone here knows about you guys.
That's awesome.
Great. Thanks, y'all.
But I'd love for you to walk me through the process that it took to make Pleasure Line, and maybe a little bit about the collaborative nature that you guys have together writing, because I've heard from some musicians that, making an album is a really, really stressful process for them. Sometimes it's really casual. They bring friends over and they just start recording. Sometimes it's this laborious process. It takes years, and sometimes it's just one day you write a song and it's done that day. So I'd love for you to comment about maybe how you work through an album from writing to release.
Totally. So yeah, for this one, leading up to recording Pleasure Line, we were on tour a whole lot, touring the Pop Therapy songs, which was so fun. We really enjoyed all the many shows we got to do for that album. It was a blast. And we were, the whole time it was us and our two bandmates, Nick and Duncan, keyboard and bass in the live band. So we all got really close. You know, we were in our tiny van for many, many hours together. And
the Aerostar, as you know.
Yeah,
yes, that's right.
Aerostar, yeah. So when it came to make the new album, we were like kind of eager to get back in the studio because we were out so much on tour that we were like so excited to have a little time to record. And we had been writing songs and stuff, but didn't have like an album, didn't feel like we had a full album. And then once we had some time, I guess it was like the end of 2019. It kind of all came together really fast once we finally sat down to make it, which was great. Like you're saying, it can be a long process sometimes. Sometimes it can take a lot out of you. Sometimes it just happens really smoothly. For this one, it was cool because we were so ready to record again. We were so excited to, that once we got the time, we got together. We had maybe 6 songs or something. Like we had more than half of the album written song-wise that we were bouncing back and forth and writing a lot together. And then we just got together in a room with Nick and Duncan and laid down a bunch of recordings, just us for hanging out for like a couple weeks. And it was so fun. And then we kind of wrote around those songs to round it out and finish the album with some other ideas, which is often how we do things. You know, we'll have like some kind of a core that feels like, yeah, we got an album here. And then the rest of the tunes kind of come after we have already begun to record those like main tunes, it feels. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was fun though. It was really fun to kind of work more quickly. And on Pop Therapy, it was a lot of Ray and I. Nick and Duncan hadn't joined the band yet when we first started recording that one. So it was a lot of me and Ray like trying to figure out what kind of sound we were looking for. Like I was saying before, like how we really have fun trying to shine a new light on a song by like doing it on a new instrument or like with a different arrangement that like, you know, changes the feeling of it a lot.
You like EQ it one way and then EQ it the other way.
Yeah, and
like
then
100%.
And then like mute all the instruments and like leave one of them. You know, like we just really have fun with that part. But yeah, so Pop Therapy, it was a lot of us too, like just trying things. And then Nick and Duncan came in like halfway through recording that one and played a bunch on it and like totally, you know, couldn't have done it without them. And for this one, we were all there from the beginning together in the recording process, which was so fun.
Yeah, we have to give tremendous credit to Nick and Duncan for being there and helping us produce it. Yeah. And we have to give credit to our new record label, Windspear, who we basically signed with like as we were making it. And they were like, all right, where's the album? Like let's do it. Let's make an album. So we had the end goal in sight. Like someone's going to put this record out and we need to make it. Whereas Pop Therapy, we're kind of just making it on our own time. So it was cool to have just kind of 2 weeks. We set aside, blocked out at Ross's house, and he set up his living room to like look like a spaceship with like synths and drum machines everywhere. He stocked the fridge, you know, so we didn't have to leave. And so we just did that for 2 weeks straight and kind of hammered it out. So that was really fun. Yeah, I had a blast.
Yeah, it was really fun to make this album.
And we wanted it to be more personal too, I think, this album, because we were getting closer with our bandmates and, you know, moving forward in our lives, like kind of getting, you know, turning 30. And and we wanted it to make it a little more radio friendly too, which is how apropos that we're speaking on the radio right now.
Yeah, I think it worked because we played on the radio like a lot. We played all of it on the radio all the time.
It worked.
It did. It definitely worked. Everything that you guys did worked, because all the experiments that you guys did, EQing this and, you know, changing the instrument on that and flipping this inspiration on its head, it worked out really, really, really well, actually, to the point now where you guys are a fairly well-known band. I think it's cool to acknowledge that if you go on your Spotify page, right, you have nearly 200,000 monthly listeners. That is just on Spotify alone. You have 200,000 monthly listeners. To put that into perspective, I know Loyola, is a sizable school, but USC here, undergraduate and graduate, is 32,000 people. The campus is massive. There's no possible way that I could meet everyone on this campus. And you guys have 200,000 people listening to your music every month. What is that like to have 4 million listens? Or Pop Therapy has 1.5, or what is that like to make something, so personal, right? To experiment with it so much and then have that reflected with such a grand response like this.
Oh, I mean,
we're truly grateful.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So grateful.
It really is incredible.
We used to do it when no one would listen. So it's just so funny. Like you said, just putting it in perspective is funny when you put it that way. Yeah, but so we are, the constant thing is that we're truly grateful for you and everybody who listens to it. And we want to keep doing it.
It's also funny that you mentioned Duncan. I just realized that I listened to his solo EP, the Convenience, I'm pretty sure, the Convenience EP. Fairly certain you mixed it or produced it?
I mixed it, yeah.
No idea about that. I love those two songs. And I had no idea that he was related to you guys at all. And he's just in your band now, which is sick.
Yeah. That's actually both Nick and Duncan, the two guys in our band. That's their duo project.
So if you just switch us around, and so they're the two guys now instead of these two guys.
That's so funny. I was listening to that literally earlier today. I had no idea until about 5 minutes before you guys came on the Zoom call.
Yeah, their music they make together is incredible.
So incredible. They're working on stuff. It's really good. Really, really amazing.
And I think with that, we're going to cut to one last final break before we wrap up our interview. But if you're just tuning in, you've been listening to Listen In with Ben Crispin, WUSC's best and only interview radio show, all live on 90.5. I've been with my guests today, Ross Farbe and Ray Micarelli, better known by their band's name, Video Age. They just released their latest album, Pleasure Line, late last year. After the break, we're going to hear a few more songs off their latest album. But first, an announcement from our sponsors. Welcome back. You're listening to Listen In with Ben Crispin, WUSC's best and only interview radio show, all live on 90.5. Today I'm wrapping up with my guests, Ross Farbe and Ray Micarelli, better known by their band's name, Video Age. Just after the break, you heard a few more songs off of their latest new 2020 album, Pleasure Line. Those last two were Aerostar and Shadow on the Wall. So, Ross and Ray, I have one last question for you guys.
I think this is one of my favorite questions to ask musicians because, you've spent a lot of time with one another. You've put out a lot of music together. And obviously you've had a lot of experiences and there's probably a fair amount of stories that you could tell. And that's why I love this question because it's so open-ended. But in your times as musicians, maybe together or separate, can you just tell me a story, happy or sad or funny, or a time that you learned something? Could you tell me a story from your time as Video Age?
Well, it all started back in 2008. It all started way back in 2008 when I first met you. You want to tell that story?
Sure, go ahead. Yeah, you can tell.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Well, I was kind of a starry-eyed 18-year-old in New Orleans for the first time. I didn't know anyone and not a soul. And I'm walking around campus and starting to make new friends and just loving the city, just soaking in all the music and culture and people and really, really having the time of my life and playing music with people. And I met Ross kind of briefly, he was in a friend group and I kind of just crossed paths for a second. And I kind of overly gushed for a minute to him. And I was like, man, isn't this cool? We're all I can't believe this worked out. We're all playing music together and, people are friendly. We're really, really doing this, man. This is so great. And then Ross really turned to me and he kind of brought me back down to earth. He was like, I think it's just everybody that smokes weed. Oh, okay. I guess you're right.
That is very funny. That is
not my finest moment.
But it could be true.
Yeah. Well,
for some.
Yeah.
Well, I usually like to end it on those stories because I think they're really fun, and there's they're little anecdotes that reveal a little bit more about the person behind the music. I think it helps humanize you guys a little bit, because again, you are a big band now, and a lot of people interact with you through your music, and I think it's cool to hear those fun stories about when you were younger and doing that stuff. That's really all the questions I have for you guys today. It was a pretty nice, succinct half an hour of stuff, and I really appreciate all your responses. They were really, really fun and really, really interesting.
Thank you, Ben.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us.
Of course.
I've been to Columbia for True False Fest before.
Oh wow, how did you like it? How did you like Columbia?
It was a great time. I had a
That's
lot of
hip.
fun.
That festival's hip.
Yeah, I had a good
They got
time.
good music there.
Before we end up here, is there anything that you guys want to say? Any shout outs, any future projects you want to talk about, anything you just want to put out onto the airwaves for the listeners?
Just want to say thank y'all so much for listening to the music, and hope we can come play a show in Columbia sometime soon. We very much look forward to that day.
And huge thank you to Nick and Duncan, our bandmates. And thanks to everybody for listening and all the support.
If somehow they haven't listened to you guys yet, I'm sure they're curious. Where can listeners find Pleasure Line, all of your music? Where can they listen?
You can get it from our Bandcamp page. You can buy all the records there, and you can listen on all your normal listening platforms that you might use. We're there.
Also, windspear.biz.
Yeah, Windspear's website is also a great place.
Yeah, great.
They've got a ton of other awesome artists as well.
Well, thank you guys so much for coming on. I really do appreciate talking to you guys. It's really humbling, listening to your music every day and then actually getting to talk to you guys about it. It's surreal. So I really appreciate it. And I thank everyone for listening at home. Once more and last finally, you've been listening to Listen In with Ben Crispin, WUSC's best and only interview radio show, all live on 90.5. I've been here with my guests today, Ray Micarelli and Ross Farbe. They are both part of the band Video Age. They just released their third and latest album in 2020 of last year, Pleasure Line. Go check it out. It is amazing. You should all listen to it. And thank you for joining me on your late Wednesday lunch hour. I am your host, Ben Crispin. Have a nice rest of your day.